Welcome to Living Fun Podcast. Rob Frankfurt here with a friend of mine, Derek Flanzraich. And Derek and I met a few years back when he was running Greatist, uh, which was a health and wellness media brand. And I was touched by your energy and your enthusiasm, your ability to communicate, and just a good guy. So I kept in touch. And anyway, Derek, why don't you walk us through a little bit of your background and how you got into the health and wellness space?
Sounds like I should have you do my intro. But yeah, my experience in health is very personal, and it's very mission based. I grew up really struggling with my weight and became sort of obsessed with why it was so hard to figure out what to actually do, and who to trust. That led me to starting Greatist, which is when we met. And Greatist, we built the largest health and wellness website on the internet. We built it through science-backed, expert-approved content that was all written in the voice of a friend that was a little further along. At the time, a lot of the content in health was total crap. And ours was not. It was the complete opposite, sort of the best answer on the internet and a voice that was fun to read. And we built it because that's what I wanted to build. It was not all up and to the right. There were ups, there were downs. And we ultimately had a nice exit to Healthline in 2019. And in some ways, it was almost a decade of running that business, but I feel like it was just the very start of my career. After that, I ended up working with and partnering with some amazing companies in the space, companies like GoodRx and Galileo Health and Oshi and Midi and Peloton and on and on. And started another startup called Ness, which was closer to the CPG space. It was actually a credit card company. We're in a moment right now where a lot of credit cards are announcing health and wellness benefits. Well, 5 years ago, I built a business that was a credit card company from scratch to compete with Amex, betting on this idea that health and wellness was the new lifestyle. We were really right about that. I think we built a beautiful product. Unfortunately, we were wrong about a lot of other things and the timing. And that company ultimately didn't succeed. And I'm now in this third phase, sort of my career, where I've got a bunch of odd jobs and projects, including a content marketing agency that's focused on health, SEO, GEO, and basically creates content for a lot of very cool brands. I have a email newsletter called 5HT, in which I continue to sort of bring my unique voice, I guess, to the health space, and share 5 things in the health space that I care passionately about every week. And I'm actually working on my first CPG business of my own, called Fixie Dust, which is like a pixie stick for your brain. And I'm hoping to launch that later this year. So I am doing a lot as usual and enjoying every moment of this exciting, growing, the world of health, and longevity has never, I think, been more popular and more mainstream. Still a lot more to go. And so I think it's a really exciting time to be in the middle of it.
Terrific. Maybe you can share what is your process when you're, deciding to start a business. How do you narrow things down? How do you navigate from one opportunity to the next?
Yeah. I think the most important thing actually is a deep sense of there's nothing else I want to do. Most businesses end up changing dramatically from, when I started Ness, I thought I was building a health insurance company. Then we ended up building a credit card company. I think ultimately we probably would have ended up not even that. But I was really passionate about the intersection of payments and healthcare, and I felt like there was a really interesting opportunity to align incentives for the first time in a space in which the incentives are very misaligned most of the time. And I couldn't get out of my head that I wanted to play in the space and do something. And even with this CPG business that I'm, tinkering with and still thinking of as a side hobby, It comes from a very, like, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, early onset Alzheimer's now, quite some time ago. And I became very obsessed with nootropics and brain health. And it's really, in some ways, like me, if I was going to build anything, it would be in this space, something I basically used myself, built for myself, and found that my friends were interested in. And so I think, putting aside all the rational, reasonable parts, I think a part of it does have to be sort of an irrational, personal, stubborn idea you kind of can't get out of your head. And when people ask me if they should start a business and they explain the business, I basically am already going to tell them probably no, because if they're asking somebody else if this is a business they should start, I don't think that that's the right place to be. When you're starting it's hard. Startups are hard, you know. At the same time, I think that's not enough, and there are a bunch of other, boxes that need to be checked, including, figuring out your business model, including figuring out how you're going to acquire customers, including putting together the right people and the right team to be able to actually execute on that vision. And then I think matching the right funding and financing, whatever that is, whether it's venture capital or not, to the vision that you have. But yeah, I think fundamentally, I'm like a very passion. I think there are all kinds of founders. I'm very much like a passion, mission driven one. And I tend to think those result in the best, most exciting businesses, personally.
And how do you go about testing once you have an idea and, when you want to consider bringing it to market?
I think it's a great question. And I actually think it's where a lot of people really stumble, because just because you think it's a good idea and you're very into something doesn't mean that other people want to buy it. And so there, I think it's really about being intellectually honest with yourself and figuring out a test that will show, in its purest form, whether people actually want what you have to offer. Now, some businesses are easier to test. Obviously, if it's a direct to consumer business, I don't think it's ever been easier. You could spin up a site using Vercel or Lovable today, basically in a day, and drive people through a sign up flow and see if they're willing to sign up for your thing. We've already tested Fixie Dust, my CPG business, in like 30 different ways. What's the right price? What's the right thing? So many people have tried to buy this product that doesn't exist yet. As we, fine tune and tweak the messaging, the marketing, and the pricing. So I think that's easy. I think B2B is much harder, right, to test. But I think it depends on the business you're building. I do think you have to go out and prove that there's a real, if you're not willing to go out and try to sell something, I think that's not being honest about, it's like betting on a world where you're right about everything. And, I think that's a way a lot of people make like foolish errors in the beginning of a business. And I say that from experience, right? I think like I've definitely done it that way before, and learned the hard way that like people, it was going to be very hard to convince people to sign up for a credit card. Every single person who said, sure, yes, I want to do that, and said that they were willing to change their current card for hours, when push came to shove and they had to hit a check my credit score button, essentially. And it was panic. Panic ensued, and people were not always willing to click that button. And look, ultimately, we ended up with a really reasonable CAC, and it was like it wasn't the unit economics that was the problem. It was 2022 and 2023, in a money hemorrhaging consumer focused business that was more of the problem. But at the same time, we vastly appreciated how difficult it would get for people to pull the trigger and sign up for a credit card. And I think if we had understood that better, we might have gone in either a different direction or evolved our idea a little further. And just to speak to my own personal experience, in why I think it's so critical to show the reports, show the receipts before you start selling something and investing a lot of money into it.
You mentioned timing wise, companies are coming out with these types of offerings today. So were you maybe just a little ahead of your time?
Yeah, I mean, I think startups fail for all kinds of reasons. There were maybe 10 things that went differently than they could have gone that I think ended in us having to shut down the business. And that was also like a brutal and hard decision to make. Um, I think I think timing was a major part of it. I think if we had started it 6 months earlier, I think it would have been very different. And I think if we'd started it 2 years later, it would be very different, and potentially successful. But I also think, again, I question like the credit card form factor today. I think we didn't realize how hard it would be to convince people to how many times we'd have to get in front of people before they'd really be willing to pull the trigger, in a way that I regret not be knowing better. And again, the numbers ultimately made sense there, but it was just we expected it to be a little easier. And The second piece was we didn't realize to the extent that a bank that offers a credit card has such a tremendous advantage because they don't have to fund, they can fund the receivables off their balance sheet. This is probably way too technical, but essentially we had to pay through the nose to allow people to spend 30 to 60 days of money, before paying it back. And that is something that Amex and Chase don't have to do because they're banks. And same for Capital One, for all these companies. And that gives them a tremendous advantage in like the economics in a way that it takes so long to get to scale. And so the business was basically not going to make money until it reached very massive scale. And that made it hard to convince investors in a tough time, like a time that was particularly not friendly to consumer big swings, I think, that this was worth, funding and seeing through. I ultimately think it still, the broad strokes of it, I think were really right and could have made a lot of money and could have, you look at some of these businesses like Built and BILT, and you look at some of the success of like, Robinhood's cards, and you think, man, like there was really an opportunity. And so, but timing is really critical and a thing that often you cannot control. I wish I could control it, but unfortunately not yet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's interesting. I see some of the wellness, like the device companies like Aura and Whoop, offering special kinds of health offerings along with, say Amex or Chase Sapphire to get
Mm-hmm.
discounts or access to their products. Um, I get why it was an opportunity, and I also understand from
Yeah.
the credit card banking side why it's also a challenge to compete with Chase and all the other big players.
Yeah, I think, in retrospect, like I should have raised $200 million, not 25, and we had 25 million in additional like receivables funding. So it was like 50 million basically. I mean, again, half of that is like debt that but fundamentally, like to do that right, I think again, I felt like we had a very, I felt like I had a very deep and profoundly true insight, which is that health and wellness products and services spent a lot of money to acquire customers and were willing to give a lot of that back in the form of rewards and benefits to acquire the right ones. That's clearly true, evident by what you just said, right? Aura, Whoop, Prenuvo, Function. Again, we partnered with Function and Prenuvo before they were cool, 3, 4 years ago. And we were working on a card in which we were partnering, but going to offer free Aura Ring. Like it was, we were definitely ahead of the curve, and we were right about that piece, which at scale would have been a much better business than some of these existing travel focused companies. But to get to scale, got to burn a lot of cash, and I don't think we realized the complexity. And we basically did the classic thing, which is you raise enough money to get to your next round of milestones to raise another round of capital. And we reached essentially all of our milestones, but that wasn't enough because the market had shifted. And looking back, I would have raised more money to be able to weather a storm like that for such a big and kind of crazy, fun, ambitious swing, right? Which again, I don't regret a single second of it. I learned it, and it basically like became a fintech founder too. And I continue to think there's a ton in payments. I think that's a really fascinating space. I've been, because of that work, was able to, I've been worked with TrueMed and a bunch of other cool companies in the space. And, but, you live, you learn. And sophomore, the thing is your freshman album, so if it goes well, the sophomore slump is often what happens next. So I think it was my sophomore album, maybe, I went too hard to reinvent myself.
And
And
that's
we'll see
interesting.
what the
Yeah, that's interesting. It also sounds as if you learned a lot from each of the different businesses you ran and are applying it. And I wouldn't be surprised one day you'll take some of that credit card learning and go at it maybe a different way. You're a young guy, so you got plenty of road ahead.
Well, yeah,
Um,
I sit, I'm like playing with the concept in life insurance now. That's what I always felt was which is, fintech, essentially Rails, right? Because you're paying money for like what is ultimately like they call it insurtech, but it's not really insurtech if what you're just doing is taking money and giving people like some kind of um, money on the other side, and these are all like financial products essentially. And I think the incentives there are really interesting and aligned, and I think there's some really fascinating things to do there. And so, yeah, I mean, I love learning, and I've gotten again the opportunity to work with 20, 30 companies in health and healthcare broadly, from CPG to digital health to offline clinics, and these are all learning a lot to be able to figure out, what's next and how to make a big difference for people.
so you mentioned Fixie Dust and putting up a website in 24 hours. So that's part of it, right? The other part is having that consumer following or a list and how to reach these people and get them engaged. So tell us a little bit about that side of it.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really intend to, a lot of these companies that hire me to help, right, advising, consulting. It started with them. They were like, do what you did at Greatist for us, right? So like at GoodRx, I helped launch GoodRx Health. At Peloton, I helped them figure out their content strategy, stuff like that. And so, I think of marketing, I think that's one of my like strong strengths. I think marketing is very underrated. I think it's actually one of the unique things that I think is very underinvest. I think it's undercounted in like founders is like, okay, how are you going to go reach people? And I think it's one of my unique, like, I think it's an area in which I spike pretty heavily, is like how to reach people and what people want and how to get in front of them. But I have a lot of things that I'm working on now, and I no longer have that media company that I had in the past, nor do I have part of the plan with Ness was to partner with those benefits partners to have them do the distribution essentially. And so I've been very focused on building my own distribution, and not with the intention of I want to become an influencer. But I started a newsletter a year and a half ago called 5HT, which I mentioned briefly earlier, mostly because I wanted to make sure I was keeping up with the trends if I wasn't building in the space. And I had sort of an ulterior motive, which is this can be in a pool of people, an audience essentially that I can share my CPG business with, can share, if I launch a life insurance idea, who knows, like that's an interesting audience to test and learn from. And so I think that is ultimately the future, right? Is like, how do you earn your audience? Because paid, as you see all these companies come to me and they say, hey, we're so dependent on paid. How do we diversify? Because ultimately paid is sort of like a race to the bottom. And especially if you can make good arbitrage and you have good money, if you can make good money from paid, you attract an awful lot of competitors, and soon you'll make less and less and less and less. That's just the way that, and it's never been easier. It's never been easier to like build a competitor to anything anymore. So, but what you can't fake is earned. right? How do you like build a real audience? How do you build community? How do you build word of mouth referrals and recommendations? And so I'm kind of doing it like the reverse way here, where I'm sort of building an audience of my own, so that as new ventures and ideas, as I'm starting to spin out more things, that there's like that first audience already interested and excited about it. At least I hope that's going to be the case.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've seen some of your postings on social media. We'll get into one topic shortly, but around weight loss. But it's your own personal journey, whether it's family or your own personal journey, just bringing it out and allowing people to sort of take that in and connecting with you. Um, well, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, look, I think health is very personal. You know, that might not be true for every space, right? But health is very personal. It's your own body, your own, the brain. I mean, one thing I've been able to learn here in the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years, like is really around how closely everything is tied, your gut, your brain, to your overall health. And I do think that people's weight, their acuity and ability to focus, their struggles with allergies or autoimmune conditions or whatever, you name it, it's all very personal. And so I tend to find that if I talk openly about my own personal challenges and struggles, I've had them, again, my whole career in this space started because I was the biggest kid in the class, drinking 6 Dr. Peppers a day, and finally got tired of that, being that kid, and I haven't figured it all out. Right, last year I went through, I had 2 kids and sort of stop paying as much attention, and startups will do that to you too. And so last year I sort of took charge and went on like another health journey, lost a bunch of weight, put on a bunch of muscle, like helped address some of the back issues that I was having. And people, I think, are really drawn to someone who's willing to share openly and honestly about struggle and what they did to try and improve. And I haven't gotten it all figured out, and I think that approach has really been like the hallmark of my career, for what it's worth. Like Greatist was spelled with an IST because it was about not being great yet, but to working on trying to be greater. And then my, new moniker for all my random projects is Healthyish, right? Not healthiest, Healthyish, right? And so that is, I think, ultimately I think a fun, accessible approach to health is the way to actually like drive action and motivation in it. At least it has been for me.
I was a college wrestler, and I saw, there was just a recent NCAA tournament, a championship tournament. There's also the big basketball tournament, but the one I pay attention to is the wrestling one.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
I've
I
heard of it.
saw
Yeah.
these, and I saw these wrestlers doing some lighthearted drills having nothing to do with wrestling. It was kind of like almost like dodgeball or something, but they kind of, they were kind of moving their whole body to try to hit the ball and tap it back to each other. It was some kind of like a handball type of game, but really it was helping them get their body ready for a competitive where your body's getting thrown all over the place, but in a joyous, almost childlike way. And to be able to bring out healthy takes on life in a fun way, that's not easy.
No, but it is fun. It should be fun, right? Because if it's miserable, no one keeps doing it. Like, if anything, I think this moment of health becoming more and more mainstream, I think it's heading in the right direction, but there's a big difference between biohacking and getting healthier. Biohacking has a very mechanical approach and an idea that your body is like kind of a laboratory. And that does not sound fun. But I think for most people, the way that they understand health is not that they need to suffer anymore to accomplish it, but that they can go out and play soccer, to get their cardio. We're in kind of a different time, I think, and I hope that that's how people are interpreting it. GLP-1s, right? That this is like what a crazy moment, where GLP-1s can be effectively the miracle pill that no one thought we would find. And what GLP-1s don't do, surprisingly, is hurt your enjoyment of food. So you can still enjoy food. I mean, if you're taking a ton, like an awful lot of it, that's not true typically, but um, for the most part, you still enjoy food just the same. You're just not thinking about it all day and craving it in quite the same way. And food is fun. People like food. Most people don't want to eat bad food all day, and these pills let you do that, or these shots let you do that, and in a way that I think is hopefully like very empowering for people to be able to choose what else to do with their time. I know for me, as somebody who has tried them, I'm currently continuing to microdose them in a very small amount. For me, the big unlock was like the food noise that I was experiencing was like pervasive in my life, and has been. It turns out my whole life I have obsessed over food in a way that I didn't realize until I turned it off, you know. And when I was able to turn it off, when it came back on, when the switch was flipped, I went cold turkey. I kind of reached my goal weight. I was like, all right, cool, I'm great. I didn't like it, and so now I basically take the least amount to like get dull that, so that it's not on my mind all day. I think some people are just wired differently, and for sure my noise is high, and that's been game changing for me.
Amazing. Has there been other techniques you've used in addition to GLPs uh, to help lose the weight and get in better shape?
Oh yeah, of course. And in fact, I don't think anyone should just do GLP-1s. I think GLP-1s can be a part, and sometimes I think actually a catalyst for overall improvements. But I was kind of doing them, I feel like, a little early, and so I had done all my research as I typically do, and it was critically important to be working out more than I ever had, taking probiotics, prioritizing my sleep. I meditate every day and journal almost every day. So, I have sort of my health habits, but it is just one part, supplementation and regular tracking of my biomarkers. I've had like kind of a crazy year of like medical stuff. And so sometimes I haven't been able to do all of that. Actually, like have been prevented from many of the things I just mentioned because like I can't do them before surgery, or I just had a surgery and I'm recovering. And I'm totally fine. But uh, it's actually times like that that you are kind of grateful for, getting back on the wagon. Like I'm just getting back to rock climbing, which I found last year, and fell in love with. It's like both a physical and mental challenge at the same time. And I mean, I can't even listen to a podcast when I'm doing it because it's so like kind of all encompassing. And I don't know, that really like is very exciting. But for some reason, doctors did not want me to rock climb when I'm doing surgeries. I don't know what they were thinking, but so I'm getting back into it and just enjoying, the moving my body and that other aspect of sort of healthy living.
Terrific. So, just on another angle, another element of your life, I noticed that you also have invested in a bunch of startups, and some have done quite well. So, congrats on that. Not an easy one to pull off.
I don't put
Is
all of
there?
them on the list. So maybe that's my mistake. Only the good ones. It all sounds
Oh,
good when you talk about the wins.
I know that. I know that move. So let me ask you this: uh, what do you look for in an investment? What sets it apart? Because you're meeting some of the best and brightest, and how do you differentiate between the ones you invest in and don't, and the ones that succeed and don't?
Should be asking you this question. I frankly don't have that sophisticated of a lens on this. I have three reasons that I invest. The first is it's someone I know and think is awesome. If it's someone that I know and think is awesome and it's early enough that it may my tiny little checks make any difference, I basically always invest. The way I see it is I don't even have to really understand what they're doing, but if I those have been the biggest successes, really, have been sort of just people that I'm like, yeah, whatever you're doing, I'm sure you're doing it for a good reason, and I trust you to do, something interesting with it. The second one is that it's on a thesis that I really truly believe. And a good example of this is niche focused digital first clinics, which I've been in and around for a very long time, and am have a very big, just I had like kind of an early thesis around this idea that if you're going to get help online from somebody, you're going to want to get that help from the somebody that is for you on the topic that you care about, and on taking care of the thing you have, and with a brand and a community that you resonate with and want to be a part of. So that was that's been things. And then the third one is because I want to learn. That's why I invested early in some of these AI companies, was not because I'm some genius future technologist, unfortunately. Sometimes I wish I were, but it's more because I am curious about learning about how they're developing and evolving. And if I'm going to put some money behind something, my own money, right, not LP money, I see it as like a forcing function to really learn. The same way I invested a little bit in crypto very early to try and understand it, and it's like kind of a forcing function. So those are the three reasons. I don't want to pretend I'm some great investor, because even though on paper some of these companies have done well, still too much are still on paper. At least
So I
that's what
love
my wife
that.
keeps telling me.
I understand that as well in my life. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your networking skills, because it sounds to me like you get interested in something. Either you hear it from somebody who's like an early mover, whether it's say crypto, and you get involved because you're curious about it, and then you start networking within that world to learn more. Is that fair to say?
I would say first crypto didn't take. So, that's not a space that I got very excited about. I mean, I still think it's like intellectually interesting, but it's not a space that I've been very involved. And maybe in retrospect, I should have invested more, but it wasn't for me. I just like people, Rob. I find people interesting. I'm curious about what makes them tick, and I'm curious and I like learning, like I said. And so, yeah, I think, I got my first in school. In college, I started tweeting. And this was before Twitter was really a big thing. And I started tweeting about my thoughts about media at the time, because I thought I wanted to be in media. I mean, eventually, I guess I am, and still in media in some ways, but um, and and that's how I got my first job. I had two job offers coming out of college from startups, and they were both relationships that I met through Twitter, which is like a very bizarre thing to say. But that, I think, gave me a lot of conviction and confidence around just reaching out to people that I think are interesting. And that compounds over time, right? That makes it easier to meet the next person, the next person, the next person. And so I don't love networking. I actually don't really, like, I'm not a salesperson, like I think I'm good at sales probably, but I don't think of myself as a salesperson. I do it because I like people and I find learning about new things interesting. And yeah, and I think like my parents were my mother loved people. My dad does not. And I think I took away from that liking people was a much better ticket to success and fulfillment and contentment, through friendship and through. It's funny the way things happen when somebody thinks of you, and knows you already. So I think that leads to professional success, but it's like that's not why I do it. I do it because it's fun for me.
You know, I'll very interesting what you just said about your mom and your dad. And, my truth is, like, my whole life I played basketball, but I was just that guy on the court. People didn't really like that much. And today I high five with the team that I'm on, the team I'm against, and I just connect with all the people because a switch went off in me, just like what you said. It's better to just have a positive attitude and get along with people and connect, because that really is who I was meant to be. And so just, manifesting it. And I've seen, a big difference in my life by just doing that. My last
I
question
love
for you,
that.
Derek. Yeah, my
Yeah.
last question for you. Wave a magic wand and improve health outcomes in America. Is it GLP related, or is it, what would you do differently, or
Oh, I
what would
think
you
that's
look
going
to
to happen.
change?
I mean, I think I don't think there's any question that GLP-1s are. They actually are. I mean, the latest numbers are 1 in 8 people are on GLP-1s. My guess it's like more like 1 in 5. Like it's dramatically shaping everything already. Waving a magic wand. If I could wave a magic wand to change something structurally around healthcare, it would be to make health insurance not primarily gotten through an employer. I think that's in some ways like the cardinal sin, like I think it is the structural problem in healthcare is that your health insurance is tied to where you are for a couple of years and not long enough for them to care about your long-term health. If that was the case and health insurance companies could care and invest in your long-term health and longevity because there was any remote incentive for them to do that, which there is not today, I think everything would shift. I think everything would change. And unfortunately, that's like as about entrenched a system as exists, right? I mean, that's, the insurance companies, the employers tied to the providers. And so I'm hopeful that this new world of like the consumer, like being a payvider, like that's going to be able to really transform things, that people are willing to pay out of pocket for like a function health. That's my hope. And I sure as heck am trying to accelerate that. Yeah, like I'm very excited about that. At the same time, I don't see a scenario in which any meaningful number of people in this country, enough meaningful people in this country are not getting health insurance from their employer. And until that happens, it's going to be really hard to really change sort of the system around to invest in the things that really matter.
Which is around prevention and
Yeah, of
awareness
course.
of how to live a healthier life so that you don't have to
Right.
tackle it after you've got the illness. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everyone agrees on that. That's like, um, even even executives at insurance companies understand that would be nice, that would be the better place for us to invest. But it's the incentives are everything. And again, this is health insurance was created as a benefit to employees when salaries were frozen, and there was no other way to like reward employees. It was done between the doctors and employers, and that's like where it started, and then we've really locked that system in, and so I don't know, we'll see. I mean, again, hopefully we can continue to eat at the margins, and that'll make a difference.
Super. Derek, as always, I appreciate you, and I enjoyed the conversation. I'll put all the links that you mentioned for the various businesses you're involved in the show notes, and we'll talk again soon.
Awesome. Really appreciate it, Rob.